and gentlemen, welcome to my TED Talk. I've been waiting to say that for a while, and now that it has come to fruition, it's a very surreal moment for me. When I was asked to speak, I knew that I had to speak. I was a little confused about what I was going to speak on, and in this internal deliberation, I kept thinking, what should I do? Since I'm an IPR enthusiast, I thought about speaking about technology and law, its regulation, etc., etc. But then I also felt that as school students, there is something more you should know than just meets the eye. And that's why my topic for today is learning compassion as a virtue of law. Because regardless of where you go, which path of life you walk, this is something you're going to take across into every individual space you occupy. Starting off, let's begin with a story. The story is about two friends, Patricia and Peter, both lawyers. Patricia is a black lawyer. Peter is a white, male, privileged lawyer. Both of them get jobs in New York, and evidently they have to find homes for themselves. Both of them go their separate paths in order to find suitable accommodation, and they have different experiences. Different experiences. So when Peter goes to house hunt, he specifically tells the landlord, sir, let's not get into an agreement. I don't want an agreement. I don't want an agreement. Patricia, on the other hand, says, I have to have an agreement. I have to have a rent agreement. I need to have a contract. Both of them come back in the evening and discuss their experiences. And Patricia is livid. She tells Peter, what were you thinking? You're a lawyer. How can you say that you don't need an agreement? And as she says this, we realize that these are two different people going through the same experience, having different perspectives. For Peter, Peter is a white man. He's been brought up in a posh neighborhood. He has seen law being used only when it is discomforting. Only when people try to harm the other have they used the law. He has never seen law as a vehicle of change for the better. So when Peter goes and argues with his tenant, with his landlord, when he has that conversation, he says, sir, I don't need a rent agreement. He views the law as a language of suspicion and distrust. He sees the law as an element which introduces non-familiarity and animosity in a relationship. Patricia, on the other hand, she's a black woman. She's been raised in a black neighborhood. She's never known what independence is unless, of course, ushered in through the concept of law. So when Patricia has that interaction with the landlord, she specifies that, sir, I know that you may be a very benevolent man, that you may have all the good things in your heart, but I need that guarantee. I need to have laws to secure my rights. Patricia does not see the law as a language of suspicion and distrust. In fact, she sees it as a language which eliminates suspicion and distrust. She sees the law as a harbinger of rights of substantive equality for herself, who is a vulnerable identity. Two people, same story, different perspectives. Meet Patricia. This Patricia is Patricia Williams of the Columbia Law School. She's a professor and a fantastic author. If you want to begin reading, I mean, this may be a little heavy for you at this point in time, but start young. Patricia analyzes this perspective, and she says that, it was wrong for me to accost Peter at that time, that he was dumb, that he was stupid to not have wanted a contract. Peter has different lived experiences. I have different lived experiences. Both of us cannot see each other's lives through our own experiences. She says that, when I was young, I was traveling on the road, I was going on a family trip, and the end of the road seemed a shade of dark. My sister said it was purple, I said it was black. We were arguing. And she quotes this analogy to the present time. She says, now that I think about Peter's story, Peter was mentioning it's purple and I was mentioning it's black. In essence, his black is not always my purple is not always his black. And that's why the white person, when he sees law, when he sees rights, he has this imagery in mind. that it's a white man wielding a gun, really angry, who's going to come and harm you. And that's why they're against the use of law as an official language of any form of enforcement. They don't see that the law, which they feel will be misused, can also be used as a security for the vulnerable identity. Try and understand. Of course, misuse of the law is very genuine possibility. And possibility aside, this is actually what has happened in Dred Scott versus Sanford. In Dred Scott versus Sanford, we have a slave who's suing the slave owner for freedom. The court upholds the slave owner's human right to property. It says your human right to property includes the slave because the slave is also a property. Do you realize how enforcement of human rights of the master, of the white man, is denying the existence of the other entity altogether? This is the epitome of misuse, of hijack of rights by those who want to misuse it. But in the bargain, we forget that every Dred Scott versus Sanford also has Somerset versus Stewart. In Somerset versus Stewart, the court mentions that regardless of what the contract is, regardless of what law you are following, we will never uphold the denial of existence, the denial of dignity upon any individual, and slavery as such is something which goes against the peremptory norms of human living. So for every Dred Scott versus Sanford, we will continue to have Somerset versus Stewart, but it is wrong to extrapolate the possibility of misuse of law to deny its benefits to those people who want it. Just saying that the right to education, for example, I'm just taking an example, that the right to education is being misused by people because there are instances of them fudging up their incomes and taking benefits of the various social sector schemes which have been introduced for those people who are vulnerable. But because of the possibility of misuse, can I ignore the vast benefits which are drawing to those people who actually need it? That is something which we need to think about. Patricia goes on to write further. And this is, please read this with the sense of passion, emotion which she writes. My great-grandfather, my great-grandfather Austin Miller, a 35-year-old lawyer, a white lawyer at that, bought my 11-year-old great-great-grandmother Sophie and her parents. And she writes within brackets, being family Negroes, the previous owner sold them as a match set. Now, this great-great-grandfather impregnated Sophie when Sophie was 12. Sophie's child, Mary, who is Patricia's great-grandmother, was sent off to the family home to look after Austin's legitimate wife. Even after all of this, Austin's oppression is normalized as her helping Patricia become a law professor. In fact, Austin is nothing but someone who engaged in slavery, who engaged in an activity which is as abhorrent as child molestation. We don't see Patricia's struggle as her own. We see Patricia's success as a consequence of the white man narrative which people try to paint. And that is only because, in most cases, we don't see the vulnerable people as people because our own lived experiences have worked towards denying them that people status. In this example, she invokes the Pearson versus Post analogy. Pearson versus Post was a very interesting case where a rabbit is shot. A rabbit is shot by hunter A, and the rabbit is injured, and as he escapes, he is caught by the other hunter. Both of these hunters start fighting now. As the hunters start fighting, they go to court, and court says, listen, just because you shot the hunter doesn't mean just because you shot the rabbit doesn't mean the rabbit is yours. You have to shoot the rabbit, capture the rabbit, and only then can you claim proprietorship over the rabbit. Patricia says that in the entire gambit, we never consider the rabbit as a living thing. It is always an object which is waiting to be conquered. It is not seen as an element which can be independently asserting the idea of dignity. The rabbit is always running from one master to the other master or always wanting freedom. When it is free, it is not really free, but it is waiting to be conquered. It is waiting to be conquested, if that's a word. The blacks like that, the blacks can never, in Patricia's word, they can never dream of a freedom unless, of course, people start believing that these are people too. Because in the traditional circumstance, the black people, Patricia compares them to the rabbit and says that we move from one master to the other. Even for the brief period when we are free, we are not really free because people are waiting to conquer us. People are waiting to own us. And that's a little problematic for us as people to actually fathom because she writes with such honesty. And mind you, Patricia is just the tip of the iceberg. When we think of identities, we think identities are very homogeneous. They are actually not. They come with layers of intersections. For instance, Patricia, a black woman, she belongs to two identities, blacks as well as women. When she advocates women's rights within the black movement, the black people tell her, please only raise issues of the color which is involved within the movement. Consequently, black women cannot raise a voice specific to black women because in order to remain real to the black movement, they have to forget gender. I'm hoping I'm sort of, making sense here. When the black community sort of advocates their rights, they only think about the color. They don't think about the gender because they don't want to reduce their solidarity as a movement. As a result, a black woman, when she raises her voice in the black community, it must only be on the basis of the color, which is the leading cause of oppression here. If you look at it, black women are forced to be silent as a sign of pseudo-solidarity, which has been produced here for the sake of usurpation of the black movement by the black man alone. Since the black movement is only on the color now, it essentially tries to signify all that which concerns the black man. Coming to the feminist movement, when a black woman comes and says that I have rights and I need to say things which concern black women particularly, the feminist movement says, ma'am, we understand you have problems, but this is a gender-only movement. You can't raise issues of color here. Because if we start allowing you to discuss any form of discrimination on the basis of your color, we will be reduced to a minority struggle. We will then take the place of the black movement. We will no longer remain the feminist movement, but we will become the black movement. And here also she is silent. She's forced to be silent. Double oppression. Because she's black also, because she's woman also. When the black movement considers only race or color, it encourages sexism. It encourages you to be sexist. When the feminist movement focuses only on gender, it encourages you to be racist. That is the problem in isolated consideration of identities as a homogeneous lot. This problem will only be evaded when we start imbibing compassion into the picture and appreciate the various unique experiences which every individual has to go through in society. Like I told you, Patricia's is only a tip of the iceberg. It is only a tip of the iceberg. Yeah, as we continue to add layers of intersections of identities, the oppression which is manifest exponentially increases. It increases to an extent which we can't fathom. Go back to Patricia's rent story. Go back to Patricia's rent story and imagine that it's not just an instance of a black woman. It is a black, LGBTQ, and also woman identity now. There are 3 layers of oppression which will happen. Now imagine that she's a black LGBTQ woman with a single child. Then imagine that she's a black LGBTQ woman with a single child who's also specially abled. Every time you add an intersection, you realize she goes even more voiceless. Because the black movement will deny her any possible freedom to express. The LGBTQ movement will deny her any possible freedom to express. The singlehood movement will possibly deny her any movement to speak because all these movements want to remain true to the core of what they come to signify. For example, the feminist movement is only about gender. The black movement is only about color. The LGBTQ movement is only about the identities which constitute the voice of that identity. Now, I realize I may have bored you with this talk, and this may have been a little philosophical, but as the upcoming generation, it is important that we try to understand compassion as not just a weakness, but compassion is actually power. If we have compassion, the world tends to be inclusive, the world becomes a better place, and since the future is looking at us for inspiration, the time is now, and as youth, we have to change the world, and that's my TED Talk. Thank you so much.